What's up, everybody, and welcome to Real Time for the Real Everyday Movie Fan. I'm Ryan Murphy,
And I'm James Sheridan.
and today we're giving you a real-time review of Community. Not a new movie or anything, especially in these times. We haven't reviewed anything new in a while. But during these closed-in times, James here actually got me really into this show. We did our show on long-awaited sequels and or sequels we'd like to see. And James brought up that he really wants to see the Community movie.
Yeah, because
And-
the old adage was always 6 seasons in a movie, and we got the 6 seasons, but we haven't got the movie. So
Exactly.
part of me still kind of wants that to happen. So that was the sort of pitch, was that was one of the few things that I actually wanted to see come about, was, the Community movie. I don't know if it'll ever actually happen, but it was certainly fun to watch Ryan kind of discover Community after my recommendation, and have him like message me every couple of days with like quotes from episodes I barely remember, and like all kinds of like little references to things that it's like, I need to watch that again because it's been a while.
And that's exactly what I did. I got done with the series and I immediately started over, even though I've got a million things on my to watch list. I'm like stressed out about it. I still have to fit in Battlestar Galactica at some point. And yet I found myself not only taking on this new show, but restarting it. But what I decided, I'm only going to rewatch the first like 4 seasons, because
Yeah,
the latter two, not so much.
I mean, there's a few good little bits here and there. Like the paintball episodes are always fun. I still like the lava episode, even though, it's kind of a bittersweet episode. It's kind of that season's version of a paintball episode. But yeah, the first 3 are really sort of the strong ones. The third and fourth one kind of are weak. The fourth one I feel is a little bit stronger, just because you get Dan Harmon's voice back in it, but still kind of hit or miss. But yeah, like I caught Community as it was airing. I saw it like maybe, I think I missed the first episode and then went back and rewatched it, and watched it like religiously from the second episode on. And from the get-go, it was very clear that this is a very different show, not just in the format and style that it's shot, but like the humor, the characters, the writing, the style that they approach things to. They love breaking the fourth wall. It's a very like fourth wall shattering kind of show. And it's very sort of self-aware, which I feel like a lot of sitcoms, especially at that time, weren't really kind of as self-aware. So it has a lot of fun kind of playing with tropes and not being ashamed of using those tropes, but at the same time, because they're kind of calling out the tropes, it's not like it's just sort of, it doesn't feel derivative in the same way a lot of sitcoms do. It feels like it knows what it's doing and it's having fun with it. And you're having fun with it along with the characters who, run the gamut from, the snide sort of cocky lawyer to, the very driven, sort of almost out of control, nerdy girl who's trying so hard to, impress everybody and do her absolute very best. And the mom who's kind of, lost her way post-divorce, trying to find what she's trying to do. The old man who's, just stereotypically racist, doesn't know where he's going to be. You get the sort of, I'm not sure if he ever actually is diagnosed, but I think he's on the spectrum.
Yeah.
Character who has a very sort of meta way of approaching not just subject matter but life. You get the I'm trying to just you get the blonde girl who is at the very beginning sort of like very strong feminist, very sort of radical protester kind of person. Yeah. Who we'll get into what happens to her. And then you've got the like sort of like goofy jock guy who becomes sort of like an adorable sidekick to the autistic character, and their antics become a whole sort of like fan favorite sort of like venture on the show and whatnot. And watching their interactions of all these different characters, and like they're all sort of broken, they're all sort of like lost, and watching them come together at this community college, which is clearly a terrible, terrible community college. Like it's falling apart at the rafters. Nobody knows what they're doing. The teachers are awful. The curriculum is like hilariously bad. Um, it's just it's so bizarre, but so much fun, and again, just so well written.
That's right. It's from the co-creator of Rick and Morty. He went on to go co-create. So fans of that show should take note.
Yeah, but I feel
That's
like Rick and Morty is sort of cynical, whereas I feel like Community, even though it has a cynicism about a lot of things, it has a sort of hopeful cynicism about a lot of things. Like I feel like the two sort of polar opposites that kind of represent Community are the Jeff and the Abed, where like Abed is the sort of like pop culture spewing machine who has all the, you know, sort of knowledge about everything, and like making all kinds of callbacks and sort of deep sort of cuts into, you know, what the tropes are and what they're kind of like exploring in each episode. And then you've got Jeff, who is just sort of like so sort of damaged and broken by the world that he's just kind of like this snide sort of what's the word I'm looking for? Not egotistical, but sort of like very sort of self-centered and very sort of I can't think of the word. Anyway, I feel like those two are kind of like the representation of the show to a certain degree. So it is cynical, but it's also very sort of lighthearted at times too, and very sort of ridiculous and silly. One of my absolute favorite subplot jokes is they do an entire episode, and the background, I think I talked about this when we did the review, but they do an entire episode, and in the background you see Abed helping somebody with her pregnancy. And at the very end of the episode, they make a simple callback to, "Hey Abed, I haven't seen you. Where have you been all week this week?" And it's like, "Oh, nowhere." But he's had this entire adventure in the background that no one calls any attention to until the very end of it, and he just sort of brushes it off. And it's stuff like that that I absolutely love the show for, because they just play with every aspect of the show. And as we've talked about, you know, the Rousseaus come from this show, and they, you know, learned a lot from doing this show, and that actually got them into directing movies in the Marvel universe. So I feel like this show is kind of push their boundaries a little bit and push a lot of people's boundaries and like the creativity that they kind of put forward.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I would say, like, for me, like, I love, like, you know me, I love Joss Whedon. I love stuff about ensemble characters of people who are lost in a lot of ways and who come together and form a surrogate family. Like, that's my bread and butter right there.
Yeah.
And so this show was sort of calling to me in that way from the first episode, but I didn't really fully appreciate it until maybe towards the end of the first season. And I wasn't really necessarily buying the characters or buying the chemistry. I kept watching it because it was short and sweet and was something to kind of kill a half hour without having to think about much. But at some point I started to realize, like, I really like these guys. I really like being around these guys. Like, I almost want to be another member in their study group. And that's for me is another aspect of fiction that I love, is when you fall in love with the characters and you want to be there with them. And at one point I just sort of turned around and said, "This is a great show." I texted my friend when I started watching the show. I'm like, my friend really recommended this, and I'm not sure it's for me. But then after a little while, I texted her back and I was like, "No, this is phenomenal." And I think, yeah. But for me, like, one of the main attractions in the first season was they made a big deal of this, like, sexual tension relationship. And I can never wait for anything. I always spoil myself. So I sort of looked for it on Wikipedia or whatever and found out that the guy and the girl, they're really teasing a lot in the first season. Like, the first season is just all these very classical tropes of, like, teasing that they like each other. And found out spoiler alert, they don't get together. And I was like, "James, what's going on? Why is this?" And he's like, "Oh, it's not that kind of show." And I'm like, "What are you talking about? It's not that kind of show." And I'm still, they abandoned the sort of love interest aspect for another one that also just never really comes to fruition. But it's really, if I could get Dan Harmon alone in the room, that's what I would ask him about. I was like, what's up with that? Why did you introduce that and then sort of renege on it? You know, would be what I would have to ask him. But I think you were actually saying that it's actually just more trying to make fun of those kinds of shows than anything else.
To a degree, I think it's also like, again, I don't think while Community is making fun of certain things, it's also like loving those things. Like one of my favorite episodes, I think is one that you didn't actually enjoy all that much, but was the classic Christmas episode where Abed's having this internal crisis about his mom not being there for Christmas, and because I suspect he's on the spectrum, he doesn't deal with change very well, and because he doesn't deal with change very well, he kind of lapses into this classic Christmas special sort of fantasy, and it's very much like the Rankin Bass sort of like clay animation, Rudolph and all those classic specials that we used to watch as kids. And while it's making fun of those things, it's also really loving being that. And by the end of it, it's fully embracing this sort of goofy, non-cynical message about that stuff. And even though like Abed's clearly having a crisis, and the psych professor is trying to help him, by the end, it's very clear that the message isn't about his crisis. It's about, the importance of the found family and what they mean to his character and his growth. And, you can redefine what holidays mean when something doesn't happen the way you kind of want it to. And I just love the point I'm trying to make is that it's a very cynical approach to it, but it's also very like it's basking in what it's doing, not really making fun of it while making fun of it. I don't know if I'm explaining this very well, but it's a bit of both worlds, and that's what I really enjoy about the show, is that it can do that kind of thing and not feel forced. So while like they're doing the classic Sam and Diane, will they, won't they, cheer sort of thing with Abed with Britta and Jeff very early on. I don't think the intention was ever really for them to be the central focus of the show. Like it's his primary sort of drive in the first episode, and what kind of brings the group together. But once the group is together, they really do become sort of a found family and become very important to each other in various different ways throughout the series, really. I don't think that was ever supposed to be sort of the ongoing sort of central thread of it, or even really much of a subplot beyond just sort of, we're playing with a sexual tension, but that's not going to be what the show is about.
Well, without giving too much away, there's the very end of the season 1 finale. That's like is like the way they do it. I don't know if you even remember what I'm talking about, but the end of the season 1 finale kind of is like, oh, what's happening here? When you know what I'm saying? But it's very much like a statement, like, hey, we might have just played with your expectations, and we might be going a totally different direction now. And it really still pisses me off. And also, they changed Britta's character so much, because she started out very much like the uber feminist sort of woman warrior sort of thing, and then she ended up being like a big joke. Everyone makes the joke she Britted it. And
which is one of the things I really don't like about some of the progression of the show, is that they kind of ran out of ideas for things to do with her, and she just became the punching bag of the show, which is unfortunate, because she was one of the better characters at the start, and then she just sort of like they didn't have anything to do with her, whereas everyone else, I feel like, kind of had sort of a continuous through line of who they were, and if they didn't grow, they were at least sort of like somewhat consistent in who they were. Britta, they just kind of dropped the ball, and I'm really disappointed by that. But going back to your point about I felt like it wasn't so much a statement, the whole thing at the end. It's just them playing with tropes and just having fun with, these are the things that you do in a sitcom. How can we do this our way and do it sort of different and entertaining? And like, because they didn't really follow through on that, I don't think the intention was ever to follow through on it. It was just sort of like, these are moments we can have, and these are moments we can have fun with. Because they really like exploring different ideas and different sort of genres throughout the show. Like one of my other favorites was the episode where they're making fun of Glee, to the point where like they're almost making a Glee episode, like unironically making a Glee episode, to the point where they actually get the same pianist in to do like all the piano bits. And yes, all the songs are goofy and silly, and they're doing like they're clearly taking shots at Glee, but by the end of it, again, it's like you fall into this like wholesome sort of, not even wholesome, but sort of wholesome message about the show, about the sort of story that they're telling. And I don't think that it was ever really supposed to be fully 100% cynical or fully 100% romantic or fully 100% this. I think it's supposed to be a sandbox for them to play in and have fun with, this is our setup, but what can we do within this? And like, they even go so far as, like I mentioned, the paintball episodes where, in one episode they're doing a full-on Western.
Yeah.
And another one they're doing full-on Star Wars. And it's like, they just keep playing with what they can do. In like a later episode, as I mentioned, they do a lava episode where, the floor is lava and the entire school has to avoid touching the floor in order to win this, $50,000 comic book or something like that. And everybody plays along, and it just becomes this post-apocalyptic sort of story within the school. And it's like, it's still within the school. They're not breaking any of the boundaries, and they're not doing anything outside of the scope of the school. They never leave this school, minus like a few small locations here and there. But within that school, they have a whole, like, just constantly exploring, like they did a Law and Order episode, which they did spot on. Which the name of that episode, which I won't mention here because it's kind of dirty, is a great joke on the name of the creator of the, I think it's called, anyway. If you know the name of the show and you know the creator of Law and Order, you know the joke that I'm talking about. I'll leave it at that. They did a great, who's the documentary director? Ken Burns. They did a great Ken Burns episode with the whole pillow blanket fort battle kind of thing. And it's like, again, they're having fun with it, but they're still sort of like paying homage to it in a sort of slightly respectful way, but still cracking like jokes about the way those stories are told. And this show is, again, their sandbox. They can do whatever they want. They can have fun with it. And as opposed to, say, like the other show that kind of came up at the same time that started, like, I think it was a week after, was Modern Family, which is it's a very sort of cutting edge family sitcom, but it sort of becomes a very classic sort of family sitcom. Like they aren't pushing any boundaries in terms of, like, I mean, they are pushing the boundaries of the jokes they're telling, but like it becomes very mundane and very sort of like by the numbers by the end of the series, which is part of the disappointment of that. Whereas I feel like Community always was striving to do something different and not always to their, benefit, but like they were trying to explore and trying to do funny, creative things. And there's another entire episode where it's a Halloween episode, and the dean gets a vat of like bad meat from the military, and everybody turns into these like brainless zombies and whatnot. And it becomes this whole zombie movie, and Abed's Batman at a certain point, and it's just like, just all kinds of weird, crazy things happening. It's just like, this is their sandbox. They can have fun. They can do what they want. And it's never one thing.
Yeah.
While still being very centrally about the school, even to the point where like the characters leave the school at the end of the 4th season and they have to come back to the school in the 5th season. It's like, they do this sort of like very ham-fisted classic sitcom sort of like, well, we need all the characters back. So, and they even call back to Scrubs season 9, where it's like, we need Zach Braff back, but how are we going to get him back? Well, he'll be a teacher this time. And it's like, they're very aware of what they're doing. And the episode that they're doing is very clearly making fun of those tropes, but still by the end of the episode, they're completely basking in, the fun of those episodes and enjoying those kinds of genres and whatnot. And I'm beating a dead horse, just going on and on about it being cynical, but also sort of like a love letter to all these things. But that's why I love the show, is that they can explore just about any genre. They can do whatever they want. And it's always creative. It's always exciting. It's always fun. And again, like you said, the characters are so strong throughout the series and so entertaining. And like, you want to be their friends. Yeah. Like I want to hang out with Troy and Abed. because I think it would be a blast, even though, they're both clearly man children, to the point where, at a certain point in the series, they move in with another of the castmates, and she's sort of like their den mother, but she's driven crazy by their antics. But at the same time, she's kind of charmed by their antics, because how can you not be charmed by those two?
It's a good show.
It's such a good show.
Except for I think certainly season 5 and 6, they just start going so over the top. The over the top nature of it goes really too far. And even you've stated that you haven't really rewatched a lot of those since, and I'm not really planning on it. And also the cast starts leaving, so the chemistry isn't there.
Yeah.
They try to write some new characters on to replace them, and it just doesn't work the same way.
I was fine with Hanky coming in. I didn't mind him as a character, and I thought he could have growth. Or what was the old man they brought in instead of
Yeah, I don't know. The character's name was Jonathan Banks from Breaking Bad and a lot of other stuff. Better Call Saul. But Jonathan Banks comes in in season 5, and then he leaves at the end of season 5, and then they bring in Keith David. And
that one was weird. I don't understand that.
Yeah. So don't bother if you're watching this. I think our recommendation is kind of the first 4 seasons. For me, it's really kind of the first 3 seasons, but I'll go ahead and watch season 4 again. And I like I said, the characters for me, like some of the meta stuff is really good, but I just really like the characters. I like the pastoral aspect of the show. That it just feels like I can hang out with these guys for a while. I can watch 10 minutes of an episode and pause it, and then watch some more the next day, or watch it before I go to sleep. And it's just it's relaxing for me. And I like the journey, especially of Jeff. I really like characters who kind of find a home they weren't looking for. And when the irony of him coming to Greendale, it's somewhere he does not want to be. He doesn't want to waste his time or make any relationships. And he ends up not only, I think, being the one who needs the group more than anyone.
Yeah.
And also
and accidentally really sort of being a leader to the group when he really doesn't want to be.
Yeah. And also falling really in love with the school too. I mean, he really loves being at Greendale to the point where he ends up, becoming a teacher there eventually, instead of going back. Spoiler. Instead of going back to practicing law. So, I love those sort of ironic journeys, and so to me, it's just a lot of fun. And that's the way I can recommend watching it. Is just watch it when you just want to chill. And you just want to hang out with some cool fictional people for a while. So.
Yeah, and another fun aspect of it is all the guest stars that end up showing up on it. One of my favorites is John Goodman.
Yeah,
who plays just such. I mean, John Goodman's good in everything that he does, but he's such a different person in this to anything I've ever seen him play before, and it's such a bizarre character and such a bizarre sort of storyline and premise. But I love every minute of that. That's probably one of my favorite ongoing storylines is the Troy being sort of coaxed into being the Good Will Hunting sort of character, but instead of it being he's a genius at mathematics or art or science or something, they're recruiting him because he's a genius at air conditioning repair or at plumbing. And it's them having fun with a Good Will Hunting, but kind of in reverse sort of tropes. It's so much fun to watch when they turn it on its head and it's something completely different. And it's there's this, you find out that the air conditioning repair addict or adjunct or whatever you call it aspect of the school is actually what's driving the school because it's so successful. And it's so sort of they treat it as this high art sort of aspect of it's the one part of the school where there's any sort of respect and dignity to what's happening. And again, they just love doing subverting your expectations on things and sort of playing with ideas, but turning them on their head and or just full on basking in it. There's a certain moment where Troy and Abed are supposed to be taking care of a mouse, and they lose the mouse, and Troy's completely scared of it. And by the end of the episode, they're doing this full on musical callback to An American Tale. And it just becomes this big Irish Celtic sort of jam at the end. And it's one of my favorite moments in the show is just them trying to sing to get this mouse back. And it's just a stupid it doesn't mean anything, but it's just the buildup of it was so much fun to watch. And it's just sort of that song kind of stayed with me in a big bad way, where like it's in my head at the moment, and like I have it favorited on Spotify, and just just those things that they keep doing. Can you tell I like the show?
Yeah. So that's our recommendation, guys, is Community. Watch it, or at least watch the first 4 seasons. So there you go.
Even just the first 2. If you want to just stop after the first 2, that's fine. But like, like, especially when you compare it to other shows, it's just such a different show, and it's so well done, so well written, and just I'm trying to come up with like solid examples to kind of prove that, and it's like I feel like I'm just looping in the same sort of like 3 or 4 words over and over again,
but it's good.
It's so good. It's so good.
Well, there you go, guys. That'll do us today for Real Time. Until next time, I'm Ryan Murphy.
And I'm James Sheridan.
And thank you for keeping it real
with Real Time. Good night.